This presentation is on the histology of the respiratory and digestive systems for Unit Lab 3, Biology 282. This is the trachea, and actually it's just a little piece of it. It's really a C-shaped structure. You can see there's a little curvature to it. And the two things I want you to notice, this is the bulk of the trachea, the structural part of it, and that is cartilage, a type of connective tissue, but specifically it's cartilage, little chondrocytes in the matrix. The other thing we want to notice about the trachea, and we'll see this better on the next slide, but the lining of the trachea is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. I'll repeat that. Pseudostratified. It looks like it's in layers, but it's not. Columnar because they're tall cells, and ciliated because they have little hair-like extensions on them. Let's look at a closer look at this pseudostratified columnar ciliated epithelium. This shows it up closer. It's this layer from here to here. It's the lining of the trachea. These hairs are the cilia, and it's pseudostratified. It looks like there's layers, but each cell is in touch with the basement membrane, so it's a false stratification. So it's called pseudo-stratified, fake layers, columnar because they are tall cells, ciliated because of these hair-like extensions, epithelium because it's a covering tissue. Pseudo-stratified 1, columnar 2, ciliated 3, epithelium 4. Pseudo-stratified columnar ciliated epithelium lines the trachea. This slide shows a cross-section through the trachea and the esophagus. This is the trachea, this is the esophagus. Now let's get oriented. This is the anterior side, the front, and this is the posterior side, the back. So the trachea is anterior in front of the esophagus, or the esophagus is posterior or behind the trachea. Now a couple things I want you to notice is that the bulk of the trachea is made up of cartilage. See this kind of a bluish purple, well maybe it's more blue, and it's labeled CAR, cartilage. Okay. Notice the cartilage doesn't go all the way around. They say that it's a C-shaped tube. Okay. And then the esophagus is back here, and if you look closely as part of the digestive tract, you'll see there's a mucosal lining, a submucosa, a muscularis layer, and then finally a serosa around the outside. Okay, but the main thing that I want you to see is the esophagus lies parallel but behind the trachea. When you swallow, the epiglottis goes down and closes off the larynx, so that when you swallow food or water, it's going to go down the esophagus. Normally that epiglottis is in the upright position, so the airways are open all the time. Normally the position is open, so air is going in and out of the trachea. But when you swallow, the epiglottis goes down and covers the glottis opening, and so then food and water have to go down the esophagus. But the main thing to notice is that the trachea is anterior to the esophagus. Now here is a section of lung, okay, and you can see all these little divisions. They're incomplete because of the roughness of the sectioning, but you can see some of them totally intact. These are the alveoli. Remember, the alveoli are the actual air sacs where the gas exchange takes place, where the body is taking in oxygen and getting rid of carbon dioxide. So that's a cross-section through the lungs. Now here are the tissue layers of the digestive tract. The inner layer, the lining of the digestive tract, is called the mucosa. Then there's a thinner layer underneath that called the submucosa. And then there's the muscularis. They have it labeled tunica muscularis. You could just call it muscularis. And then there's an outer covering, the serosa. Okay, so 4 layers of the digestive tract, and this doesn't make any difference whether you're in the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine. We always find 4 tissue layers. The lining is called the mucosa. That's what the food is in contact with. This is the lumen, or the space inside of the digestive tract here. So there's mucosa, then submucosa, then muscularis, and then finally the covering, the outside covering, is the serosa. Here just shows you the stomach. This is showing you the mucosa, and there's big finger-like extensions called villi, and then down deep between the fingers are what are known as the crypts. But that's just to show you an example of what the mucosa looks like in the stomach. The mucosa looks a little bit different in the esophagus, different in the stomach, different in the 3 sections of the small intestine, the duodenum, the ileum, and the jejunum and the ileum, and then also in the large intestine. But it looks modified, the mucosa does, but you always have the same 4 layers, which is mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa covering.